Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back. You're standing barefoot in a patch of dry grass under a blazing sun. The wind smells like dust and something that might be cat urine, but you're not sure because you've never smelled deodorant. There's no phone signal, no roads yet. Just you, your band of lanky, hairy, awkward proto-humans, and a future that stretches like the savannah itself, wide, terrifying, and extremely bitey. We're 5 million years ago, somewhere around what's now Eastern Africa. The air shimmers with heat. You blink against the brightness, and there it is, the beginning. Not of everything, but of you, of us, of bipedal weirdos with too many thoughts and not enough fur. Tonight's story isn't just about surviving. It's about adapting slowly, painfully, and with an evolutionary shrug that says, good enough. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. You're going to get chased, dehydrated, sunburned, bitten, and outvoted by smarter cousins. But still, you'll change. You'll keep changing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is. Your survival odds might depend on it. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not fully human yet. You don't have language. You barely have knees that work properly. But your kind hominins have just done something quietly revolutionary. You've stood up, imagine that. One moment you're in the trees swinging like you own the place, and the next, you're toddling around upright like a confused toddler on stilts. Bipedalism, that's your golden ticket to everything that comes next. Fire tools, pop songs about breakups. But for now, it mostly means your back hurts and you look vaguely ridiculous. Still, it works. Sort of. You're Australopithecus, or maybe Sahelanthropus, depending on who you ask, and when the fossils were found. You've got long arms, but you don't swing much anymore. You've got a head that leans forward and a brow ridge that could probably block hail. Your brain's smaller than a modern chimp's, but your legs, they're doing something new. Walking upright frees up your hands. Now you can carry stuff. Food, babies, maybe a stick you think looks cool. Nobody knows exactly why bipedalism caught on, but theories fly around like gnats over a carcass. Maybe it helped you see over tall grass. Maybe it helped you cover ground more efficiently. Or maybe you just fell out of too many trees and said, nope. Historians still argue whether we walked first and thought later, or if those two things evolved in a clumsy, interlocked mess. Either way, standing upright wasn't a one-generation deal. It took millions of years of slow, subtle shifts, hips angling feet, flattening knees, rotating just enough to make modern yoga instructors cry. You don't hunt yet. Not really. You scavenge. You follow bigger, scarier predators at a distance, waiting to see if they leave anything behind. You might bash bones open with rocks to suck out marrow, which is one of your few high-energy treats. The rest of your diet: tubers, fruit leaves, and an unsettling amount of insects. Your prey more than predator. Leopards, saber-toothed cats, massive birds. They all see you as an undercooked snack with legs. So you live in groups, small ones. You groom each other to bond. You sleep in trees because it's safer. You chirp, grunt, and gesture. Language hasn't evolved yet, but the seeds are planted. When you're startled, everyone's startled. When one member panics, the whole group bolts. And yet, in the stillness of evening, there's something eerie about you. A glint in the eye that no other creature on the savannah quite has. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's the spark of future anxiety. Whatever it is, it's starting to show. Let's not pretend it's easy. Your joints are bad. Your balance is weird. Your babies are helpless blobs for years, and you don't have books, pacifiers, or Wi-Fi to get you through it. You learn slowly, from trial, error, and trauma. Like, hey, remember when Ula tried to pet that snake? Let's not do that again. That's your education system. Fascinatingly, fringe theories even suggest you evolved bipedalism partially due to wading through shallow water. The so-called aquatic ape hypothesis says early humans adapted to water edges, which could explain everything from your partial hairlessness to your love of swimming. Mainstream science doesn't fully buy it, but hey, it's a juicy thought. The world is not static around you. Mountains rise, lakes dry out, forests retreat. East Africa becomes a patchwork of environments, some lush, some barren. And in each one, different hominin species emerge and vanish like experimental drafts. Not all of them make it. Actually, most don't. It's like an evolutionary talent show, and only the weirdest and most adaptable acts move forward. And speaking of weird, your feet. They used to grasp like hands, but now they're stiff and angled for long-distance trudging. You're not winning any marathons yet, but you're built for endurance. Over time, this will become your cheat code, running prey to exhaustion while sweating like a broken faucet. That's right. Your ability to sweat is one of evolution's greatest plot twists. As night falls on your patch of ancient dirt, you nestle into branches, maybe with one eye cracked open for hyenas. Your mind isn't yet dreaming in language, but there's awareness, memory, maybe even a sense of connection to others around you. That little flicker, primitive empathy, will someday become entire civilizations. But for now, the stars shimmer over the grasslands, the trees rustle, and a distant roar reminds you you're still the underdog here. And that's the beginning. Not majestic, not triumphant, just upright. Stumbling forward on feet, still figuring it out. You wake up to something breathing too close to your ear. It's not romantic. It's a baboon. You flail. It screeches. Your whole group jolts awake in a tangle of limbs, panic grunts, and one very confused child who probably thinks the world is ending. Again. Just another morning on the open savanna where even napping feels like an extreme sport. Welcome to grassland life. No trees, no safety nets, just tall yellow stalks, a relentless sun, and a 360-degree buffet of danger. You, a bipedal hominin with questionable toenail hygiene and zero sunscreen, have somehow decided this is where you're going to live. Smart move, debatable. There's a fringe theory floating around that suggests early hominins didn't choose this. That environmental shifts, think tectonic plates doing the cha-cha, transformed lush forests into open plains, and you just sort of didn't get the memo. The once comfy tree life became harder to find, so your species had to adapt or disappear. Either way, here you are, standing in a landscape that's both beautiful and absolutely unforgiving. The grass hides everything: predators, insects, holes big enough to snap an ankle and ruin your week. It also hides you if you crouch, but crouching is risky when your neck isn't designed for constant swiveling. You're better upright, sort of, sometimes. You travel in groups not because you're social, but because being alone means dying faster. You spot vultures circling. They don't wait for you to die. They're optimists. They believe in potential. You know those lovely golden documentaries of African plains, with herds of wildebeest and gentle breezes, yeah. Forget that. This isn't a postcard. This is a test. Shade is rare, and without fur to block sunlight, you cook faster than a hot dog on asphalt. You sweat to cool off, a clever evolutionary trait that only works if you find water before you shrivel like a raisin. Remember your upright posture. It has an advantage here. It reduces how much of your body is exposed directly to the sun at high noon. That vertical alignment means you absorb less heat than your quadrupedal ancestors. Small win, considering you're also slower and less agile than anything with claws. Still, you've got tricks. You learn where shade collects under rocky outcrops near termite mounds, sometimes even beneath the belly of a particularly patient antelope not recommended. You track the wind. You start moving in the cooler parts of the day, early morning and dusk. You also start watching the animals, where they walk, where they drink, where they don't go. Because if the elephants are avoiding a certain path, it probably means something toothy is waiting there. Historians still argue whether your kind adapted first by following other species or simply observing patterns and learning fast. Either way, your brain's starting to light up in ways no other primates quite has. You make connections. Water means life. Open spaces mean visibility, but also vulnerability. Trees are safe, but only if you can still climb. Speaking of climbing, good luck, your feet are already transitioning into platforms for walking, not gripping. Every time you try to scamper up a tree, you look like someone trying to scale a jungle gym in ski boots. Graceful, not even a little. You start to specialize. Some of your group stays closer to trees, gatherers, climbers, fruit finders. Others take to the open savanna, scavenging for leftovers and learning how to read the landscape like a grim, dusty map. There's even a quirky piece of evidence. Early hominin bones have been found, with tiny etchings, bite marks from large birds. Yes, birds. Specifically, the Haast's eagle and similar raptors who didn't just snack on rodents. These flying nightmares could lift a child and were totally cool with dropping you from a height if you annoyed them. You are small. You are fragile. You are not alone. But there's an upside to all this misery, a kind of accidental genius. The harshness of the savannah is what starts shaping your survival mindset. You begin relying on cooperation more. You share knowledge. You might not have words yet, but you can gesture, grunt, teach. You learn that together is better than clever, at least for now. And you get creative, need shade. You find wide leaves drape them, need water. You suck it out of roots. You even start digging shallow pits to store rainwater. Not very successfully, not yet. But still, something's stirring in that overtaxed brain of yours. That brain, by the way, is slowly inflating. It's still not great. You don't know how to count or imagine the concept of Thursday, but your cerebral cortex is working overtime. Sensory processing, pattern recognition, early versions of fear memory anticipation. You pause near a hill and see movement in the grass. Your body tenses. Is it a lion, a warthog, a rival hominin? Could be any of the above. And that's what living on the savannah does. It keeps you slightly paranoid at all times, which ironically is an excellent survival trait. Hyper-awareness, scanning, analyzing. You start associating tracks with animals. You develop routines, check water holes before approaching, avoid tall grass after storms, never turn your back near a termite mound. Don't ask. You grow calluses, thick soles, scars. You learn where thorny bushes make good protection and where they just rip your skin open. You start using rocks not as tools just yet, but as weapons. You throw them, poorly, but sometimes it works. And when it works, once you remember. Remember the baboon from this morning. You don't see him again, but you do notice where he sleeps. And a few weeks later, you figure out how to sneak into his foraging zone when he's off scratching fleas. Congratulations. You've just invented petty territorialism. The air thickens as evening sets in. Somewhere nearby, hyenas begin that horrible laughter. You huddle close with your group. The grass crackles, and yet you're not panicking. you're adapting. And out there, just beyond the trees, you barely fit in anymore. Another group of hominins is doing the exact same thing. Maybe differently, maybe better. The competition is beginning, and the savannah doesn't care who wins. Your head hurts. Not from injury, though, yes. That time you tripped over a root and headbutted a termite mound was tragic, but because it's growing. Not fast, not overnight. You don't wake up and suddenly start reciting poetry. But over generations, something wild is happening under your thick, sloped skull. Your brain is bulking up. It's not vanity, it's survival. We're still millions of years before electricity, sliced bread, or even socks. And yet the real revolution isn't fire or farming. It's the slow, relentless brain upgrade. You probably haven't noticed, but your lineage is now part of the Homo genus. Let's say you're one of the early members, Homo habilis perhaps. Your brain is now around 600 to 750 cubic centimeters, which still wouldn't impress any modern neurologist. But compared to your Australopithecine ancestors, you're a thinker. A slow one, but still. And what are you doing with all that new gray matter? Well, you're figuring things out. Tools, shapes, maybe even the early glimmers of planning. You don't just find rocks, you look for specific rocks. Sharp edges, good grip. You might even hold onto a tool overnight instead of tossing it aside when done. That's basically prehistoric hoarding, and it's adorable. Archaeologists call these simple chipped stones the Oldowan tools. You don't know what that word means, of course. But when you bash one rock against another and end up with a cutting edge, something flickers in your mind. You use it to strip bark, crack bones, scrape meat, and the moment you see that it works, you do it again. Historians still argue whether these tools were used instinctively, like a chimp might use a stick to get termites, or if you actually had some vague concept of, this shape does that job. The truth is probably somewhere in between. And here's where things get spicy. Using tools doesn't just help you survive. It actually reshapes your brain. That's right. Your environment starts rewarding problem solvers, tinkerers, thinkers. Over time, evolution doubles down on the kind of hominin that stops and asks, wait, what if I hit it twice? Your hands evolve alongside your head. Your thumbs get more precise. Your fingers adjust for a better grip. Dexterity becomes destiny. You're not just surviving, now you're manipulating your environment in little awkward, beautiful ways. And all that manipulation, it costs fuel. See, brains are expensive. Your growing cortex needs calories, like a teenager needs Wi-Fi. You burn more energy than any animal your size. So what happens next? You change your diet. Enter meat. You've likely eaten small animals before: lizards, insects, the occasional bird egg. But now, thanks to tools and brain power, you're going after bigger prey. Or to be honest, other predators' leftovers. You watch vultures descend. You listen for the bone crack of lions finishing dinner. Then you swoop in with your sharp little rocks and start scavenging. You're not hunting yet, not seriously. You're a coward with good instincts. But your timing is better. And the bones you bash open, they give you marrow, a calorie-dense superfood your brain loves. It's greasy. It's nutritious. It's a bit gross. But it fuels growth. There's even a quirky theory that the act of butchering carcasses helped spark language, not full sentences, but basic communication. You smash, I watch, or move. That's my shin bone. The theory goes that coordinating scavenging required a level of cooperation more complex than simple grunts. Your vocal cords weren't fully evolved, but your brain was testing the waters. At night, around whatever passed for a camp, your group may have started doing something almost ritualistic, sharing meat. Maybe not generously, let's not pretend you're saints, but deliberately. You hold on to scraps. You gesture for help cracking a joint. You notice that feeding others makes you feel something. Empathy, or just a strategy to avoid getting clobbered. Tough call. Historians still debate whether these meat-sharing habits were communal bonding or just transactional bartering. But the result is the same: stronger social ties, deeper cooperation, more survival. And the more you cooperate, the more brain power matters. Your body doesn't get much bigger during this phase. Still under 5 feet tall, hairy, thin-limbed. But your skull changes. The face shrinks inward. The jaw gets smaller. Why? Because you're not chewing raw tubers and bark all day anymore. Tools do the hard part. In fact, a fringe but fascinating theory suggests your jaw weakened because of tool use, and in turn that allowed your cranium to expand upward. It's like nature swapped brute chewing force for mental firepower. You think you're tough, you're not. But you're clever. And that's a new kind of danger. You also start noticing patterns. Where animals move, where trees grow, maybe even where rain falls. You store information. You might even begin to anticipate events, migrations, fruit seasons, predator routines. That's strategy. That's the foundation of what will eventually become planning. And somewhere deep in your gut, there's a feeling that's new wonder. When lightning flashes in the sky, you stop and look. Not in fear, well, maybe a little, but with awe. What is that? Is it a god? A warning? Or just something beautiful? You don't have the words yet, but your brain does a weird thing. It remembers. The crackle, the light, the smell of ozone. You dream about it. You imitate it in your own way, maybe by clacking stones together or tossing dry leaves into the fire. Fire. You don't control it yet, but you've seen it, and you want it. That fascination with power, with tools, with control, is what sets you apart. Sure, you still get chased by hyenas, bitten by snakes, and probably poop your loincloth equivalent every time a thunderstorm hits, but your brain is turning those experiences into something new. Learning. There's no classroom, no lectures, no books, but every mistake writes a permanent note in your neural pathways. Don't poke the thorn bush. Don't sleep near the water hole. Don't trust Uru when he says it's safe. And here's the twist: those who don't learn don't last. The sun sets again on a rocky outcrop, your small group huddled under overhangs. You clutch your favorite rock, the one that makes nice flakes when struck just right. You don't know why you keep it, but it feels important, like it holds potential. Tomorrow you'll try something different. Maybe chip it from a new angle. Maybe use it to cut instead of smash. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be the first to invent a better way. There's a moment, just a flicker in the early morning fog, when you almost forget you left the trees. The wind rustles through nearby acacia branches, and for half a second, your instincts urge you to climb. You remember what it felt like to swing, to perch, to nap in the crook of a branch with your feet curled around bark. But your body reminds you that ship has sailed. You try to scramble up a low trunk just to get a better view, and your foot slips. Your arms are long, but not long enough. Your hands don't grip like they used to. And your toes, they've gone full traitor. No more prehensile cleverness, just flat, stubby levers designed for ground travel. You're not a tree dweller anymore. Not really. This is what it means to be transitioning fully to ground life, not by choice, but by biome. You've moved out of the canopy apartment and into the savanna tenement, and your lease is non-refundable. Some of your cousins, like the still-climbing Australopithecus afarensis, manage a hybrid life. Part tree, part ground. They still sleep up high when they can. They forage from branches. Their shoulders are built for it. But you're leaning hard into terrestrial life. You sleep on the ground now. Well, not directly on it, you use leaves, grass sometimes, even scavenged hides from carcasses you've found. You curl up close to others for warmth and vigilance, your ears always pricked for the low rumbling cough of a big cat. You've become nocturnally nervous. Even when you're exhausted, your sleep is light. Your dreams are jumbled. Fire hasn't joined your toolkit yet, so you huddle in shadows and hope the hyenas are busy elsewhere. And during the day, you move, constantly. You follow herds, birds, cloud lines, anything that might hint at food or water. And because you're stuck on the ground, your senses sharpen. You notice subtle changes, the droppings of a zebra that passed this morning, the softened soil near a spring, the broken branches that suggest a predator might be circling. Your mind connects dots faster now. That rustle, not wind. That smell, not edible. That bird call probably means danger. Historians still argue whether early ground-dwelling hominins learned to be paranoid, or if the shift from trees simply amplified natural vigilance. Either way, you're jumpy in all the right ways. You've also got a new issue exposure. The ground is not gentle. Sharp rocks slice your feet. Insects bite anything soft. And there's no leafy canopy to block the sun. You burn, you blister, you squint. Your species may not know it yet, but this pressure is what will eventually favor darker skin pigmentation, melanin as armor against UV radiation. Fringe anthropologists even suggest your lack of fur is a result of ground life. Trees offered some protection from biting insects and overheating. But down here, hair traps heat. So your species starts shedding it, sweating more, and eventually becoming the oddly naked primates we are today. You look strange. Not quite ape, not quite human. Something in between. Your legs are longer than your arms now, another signal that climbing is no longer your focus. You walk more efficiently, and though it's not graceful, it's steady. You can cover distance like a champion. That endurance becomes your superpower. Predators like cheetahs and lions sprint. You trot for miles, hours, all day if needed. You might not catch anything, but you'll exhaust it. There's even a name for this kind of persistence hunting endurance predation. And while you're not quite there yet, the foundation is being laid. You notice that the ones who walk farthest find more food. The ones who carry things, sticks, stones, useful bits have more options. The ones who adapt to the ground. They live longer. Your spatial awareness improves. You remember which paths lead to shade, which ones cross known animal trails where the edible roots grow even in the dry season. You don't draw maps, but your mind makes one. You even start using natural landmarks. A twisted baobab, a strange rock outcrop. That termite mound shaped like a sleeping hyena, you'll never unsee it. These guide your movements. Later, they'll guide your myths. And your tools evolve too. Now that you can't just pluck fruit from overhead branches or pick termites off bark, you adapt. You break open nuts with stones. You dig for tubers. You start using sticks, not just for poking, but for digging. It doesn't sound glamorous, but that digging stick. It's one of the earliest tools we ever created, and it sticks around for millions of years. It's your first taste of modifying nature. Sure, you're not planting crops or herding goats yet, but you're already influencing the land. You uproot things. You disturb insect colonies. You flatten pathways just by using them repeatedly. The ground begins to reflect your presence. Meanwhile, up in the trees, the other primates continue their lives with barely a second glance at the grasslands below. They're faster, more agile, arguably safer. But you're pushing boundaries. Not for fun, not for glory. Out of necessity. That necessity brings cooperation. Because ground life is dangerous, you begin to rely on others more. You share lookout duties. You alert each other with grunts or body language when something dangerous moves into view. You help the injured sometimes, not out of charity, but because it strengthens the group, and something interesting begins to happen. Social structures deepen. You start to form hierarchies. Alpha behavior, sure, but also subtle roles. The one who finds food, the one who spots danger first, the one who keeps peace in a scuffle. Nothing written, nothing formal. But the early roots of organized society are there, buried in the dust of your migration path. The nights get colder. You press tighter to the group. The stars feel vast and unknowable above you. You don't name them yet, but you stare up often as if trying to understand your place. And every so often, you look back at the trees, but only for a moment. Because what you're building out here on this open, exposed, terrifying plain is something new. Something tree life could never give you transformation. You're a ground dweller now, and the earth is watching. You've been chewing the same root for what feels like an hour, and honestly, it tastes like dirt-soaked rope. Your jaw aches, your teeth are grinding. And while you're definitely not going to starve today, you are very much over this diet of fibrous leaves, tubers, and the occasional disappointing fruit. But then you smell it. Not the root. Not the dung. Something else. Meat. It's faint at first. Just a savory undertone on the breeze. But your group freezes. Heads lift. Nostrils flare. You scan the horizon, and there it is, vultures circling. You start moving quickly but quietly toward what might be the leftovers of a predator's kill. You don't know it yet, but your kind is about to enter the meat era, and it changes everything. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're not sprinting down gazelles with spears just yet. But you've gotten smarter, more observant. You've realized something most other animals haven't. Scavenging is easier than hunting, and if you time it just right, you can walk away from a lion's dinner with more than just regrets. You arrive to find the scene already messy, a zebra carcass mostly devoured, but there are still bones, ribs, joints, and marrow. Out comes your trusty rock. This is where it begins, tool-assisted scavenging. With a sharp-edged stone, you chip away at tendons and cartilage. You crack open femurs. You scoop out the marrow with fingers that are clumsily precise. It's not elegant, but it's effective. And your brain loves it. That greasy, calorie-rich marrow is a superfood for your growing mind. Combined with the occasional scrap of raw flesh, it provides the dense nutrition that tubers never could. You're still supplementing with plants, of course, but your dietary shift toward animal protein is the evolutionary version of discovering espresso. Historians still argue whether this shift toward meat preceded the brain's rapid expansion or was a result of it. It's the classic chicken or egg question, only with mammoth bones and brain folds. But either way, one thing is clear: meat fuels intelligence, and your group is starting to lean into it. Eventually, scavenging isn't enough. Too many competitors, too much risk. You need more. So you start trying something bold. You hunt. Not like lions, not fast, not with claws. You hunt like you slow, steady, strategic. You spot a wounded antelope. You follow. It limps. You walk. It runs. You walk. Hours pass. You keep walking. You're not built for sprinting, but you are built to sweat. Your nearly hairless body, your upright stance, your long legs, they all work together for one purpose: persistence. Eventually, the antelope overheats, collapses, and you arrive tired but alive. Welcome to persistence hunting. You don't catch prey, you outlast it. Not every attempt works. You still fail more than you succeed. But with every success, your confidence grows. So does your risk tolerance. You start coordinating, flanking, driving herds toward traps, cliffs, gullies, hidden pits. One weird archaeological tidbit. There's evidence of early hominins driving herds into natural dead zones, places where escape was difficult, and then pummeling them with rocks. Not graceful, not glorious, but definitely effective. And once you've got the meat, you share it. That's where things get really interesting. Because unlike a pile of berries or a stalk of grass, meat is divisible. It's tradable. You can eat half and give the rest. Or not. Your choice. Suddenly, social currency enters the scene. Who gets the biggest chunk, who gets none? Food becomes politics. And politics, it turns out, accelerates intelligence. Now you're not just dealing with predators and weather, you're navigating egos, alliances, grudges. You learn to read faces, to anticipate moods, to lie. Yes, even this early. Lying starts soon after meat enters the picture. Coincidence? Probably not. One day, while dragging a half-eaten carcass through the brush, one of your companions picks up a particularly sharp rock. It cuts better than the others. Cleaner, faster. They keep it. And a week later, when the same shape is recreated by accident or imitation, it becomes the beginning of intentional tool design. You've moved from using what you find to shaping what you need. The Acheulean hand axe isn't here yet, but its ancestor, the simple stone flake, is now spreading. Different groups make slightly different shapes. Some prefer wide scrapers, some like pointed cutters. The stone tool has officially gone regional. Fringe researchers suggest that even early on, tool shapes might have acted like identity markers. As in this shape, and that's our groups. It's speculation, of course, but the idea that even early hominins had symbolic preferences, that's deliciously human. You still can't talk, not really. But your gestures are getting clearer. You grunt with purpose. You point. You mimic. Your group communicates well enough to pull off basic strategies, especially when there's meat involved. And meat means danger, because now you've got competition. Hyenas, lions, jackals, even other hominins. Some groups clash over territory, over carcasses, over water. These aren't full-on wars, but they're not friendly greetings either. Conflict introduces another evolutionary pressure: cohesion. The tighter your group, the better your odds. Trust becomes a thing. So does loyalty. You learn who has your back, who warns you when a rival is near, who steals the best scraps when you're not looking. Night falls and your group gathers around a spot cleared of brush. You can't make fire yet, but you've seen it. You want it. You've probably even tried to recreate it, rubbing sticks, banging rocks, but so far nothing but smoke and disappointment. Still, you've learned to use natural fire. Lightning strikes, you watch. You follow the burnt trail. If you find a smoldering branch, you don't panic. You use it maybe to scare off a predator or to keep insects away. It's primitive, but it's a step. One of you, maybe a young one, starts playing with a charred stick, drawing in the dirt. Circles, lines, nothing special. But in that moment, you've just flirted with symbolism. Your brain is hungry for more than food now. It's hungry for meaning. You're crouched beside a pile of damp, rotting leaves, fiddling with two sticks, like you've done 100 times before. The friction makes your palms sore, your arms ache, your patience thin. You're about to give up again when something incredible happens. A wisp of smoke. You freeze. A few more frantic rubs, and snap, a tiny spark glows, catching on the brittle fibers. You blow gently. The smoke thickens. And then there it is, fire. It smells like hope. And burnt bug wings. Welcome to your species' first real magic trick. You've finally tamed something wild, something that eats forests and dances in thunderstorms. You don't understand it yet, not how it works, not what it wants. But you know this much: it's warm, it's bright, and it keeps the terrifying things away. Sort of. The first nights around fire are quiet, mesmerized. You stare into the flames like they might talk back. They crackle, spit, hum. One of you pokes it with a stick. Another tosses in leaves to see what happens. Suddenly, you're not just surviving the dark, you're extending the day. Firelight changes everything. Now you can cook. That means softer food, which means shorter chewing times, and yes, smaller jaws. You start eating tubers you couldn't chew raw. You roast meat. You boil water eventually. All of this means better digestion and more energy for that lovely, ever-growing brain of yours. Historians still argue whether fire control began with Homo erectus or slightly later hominins. The evidence is scattered ashes here, blackened bones there, but something definitely shifts around this time. You're no longer just using natural fire. You're keeping it, nurturing it, feeding it like a strange, demanding pet. And fire does more than cook. It transforms your social life. Before fire, the day ended at dusk. You ate quickly, huddled, then hoped nothing sniffed you out during the night. But now you gather, you linger, you talk. Well, sort of talk. It's still mostly grunts, gestures, and very dramatic eye contact. But you point at the stars. You mimic the lion you saw earlier. You bang two sticks together in rhythm, maybe even invent the very first off-key drum solo. You're not just surviving anymore. You're connecting. Some of you start forming stories. They're crude, nonverbal. But the rhythm of shared memory begins. You gesture to explain how Uru fell in a river. Everyone laughs. It becomes a joke, then a performance, then a ritual. This is where early culture begins, beside the flames, between bites, during the brief moments when you're not running, or hiding, or bleeding. And what's that under your feet, Ash? A black, soft carpet that whispers of last night's meal. Eventually, someone realizes Ash keeps bugs away. Someone else notices that standing in smoke seems to drive off biting flies. One clever individual even rolls in cooled ash as a form of ancient insect repellent. Quirky, absolutely. Effective. Surprisingly, yes. Congratulations, you've just invented the Stone Age version of sunscreen. And yes, later variations will include crocodile dung, clay smears, and crushed plant goop, all applied liberally to skin. The fashion isn't great, but hey, it works. Fire also lets you do something shocking: settle. Not full-on villages, not yet, but staying put for more than a day becomes possible. You build windbreaks from branches, stone circles to shield the fire, pits to store tools or charred food. These are your first campsites, and they're cozy-ish. There's a quiet intimacy now to life in your group. Nights are no longer just survival tests. They're moments to observe each other. Who sits where? Who shares food? Who hoards embers like a squirrel with a lighter? And you begin to pair off, not permanently, not monogamously, but in ways that matter. Maybe someone brings you the first bite. Maybe you help chase off a hyena from their child. Affection forms not just for mating, but for companionship. You start to miss people when they're gone. And when one of you dies, you linger a little longer than before. Some scholars believe the first death rituals, if you can call them that, emerge around fire. Not elaborate, not spiritual, just different. A pause, a gesture. Maybe placing a stone beside the body, maybe returning later. There's no proof it's grief, but there's a change. Because now your nights are filled with reflection. You watch shadows flicker. You think. You imagine. What if the stars are animals? What if the lightning is angry? What if that growl outside the firelight isn't a predator, but something else? The line between real and imagined blurs. And that, dear listener, is the first breath of belief. Fringe theories abound here. Some suggest early humans believed fire itself was alive, a sort of spirit. Others say it was revered as a sky-born gift, especially after witnessing it descend in bolts from above. There's no proof, of course, just hints, ash piles, burned bones, stained stones. But you can feel it, can't you? That sense that fire is more than heat. It's power, and power demands stories. You start making marks, scratches in wood lines in dirt. Meaningless, maybe. But maybe not. Maybe you're trying to remember, to record, to pass something on. The ones who learn faster become leaders, not through force, well, sometimes through force, but through insight. That animal sleeps during the heat. That plant makes you itch. That cave is haunted. These observations give you social capital long before gold or thrones, and fire gives you time to share them. One night a comet streaks across the sky. Bright, fast, silent. Your entire group goes still. You point. You grunt. Your eyes widen. You don't know what it is, but you remember. And months later, when someone sees something similar, they tell you. This memory sharing becomes your proto-history, the very beginning of oral tradition. It's not accurate. It's not pretty. But it matters. And through it all, fire remains your anchor. It's dangerous. It burns. It escapes sometimes and turns your shelter to ash. But you come back to it anyway. You protect it. You carry embers in hollowed stones or wrapped in leaves. It becomes your guardian, your weapon, your mirror. Because when you look into those flames, you see change. And for the first time in your long, hungry, frantic existence, you see yourself. Your feet hurt. Again. Not the sharp stab of a cut or bite, just the dull, constant ache of distance. You've been walking for days, maybe weeks, across cracked earth, through thorny brush, past rivers, mountains, forests that felt too quiet. The sun moves overhead like a lazy hunter always watching. You're not lost. You're migrating. Your group smaller now, tighter, leaner moves with a strange kind of rhythm. Not aimless wandering, but something deeper. Call it instinct. Call it pressure. The land dries up, herds shift, seasons twist, and you don't argue with the signs. You follow them. And so begins one of the most astonishing and quietly desperate feats in human history, the Great Migration. It doesn't happen all at once. No one sounds a gong and yells, "Pack up, we're heading north." It happens in waves, a little farther each season, a little braver with each generation. You, a dusty little hominin with sore ankles and a sharpened stick, are part of the first great exodus. From East Africa to North Africa, then toward the Levant, and eventually into Europe and Asia. Historians still argue whether Homo erectus was the first to go full passport mode, or if earlier hominins tested the waters. But fossil trails and stone tools seem to whisper the same thing: you moved. Far. What drove you? Climate, mostly. The African continent was shifting forests, retracting savannas, expanding lakes, drying up. Resources vanished. Predators changed. Entire ecosystems collapsed, and your only real option was to leave or die. You left. It's not an easy choice. Migration means risk. New diseases, strange predators, unknown terrain. You don't know where the rivers are. You don't know which plants to eat. You don't know who else might already be living there. But you go anyway. because hunger doesn't negotiate. And thirst, she's a cruel negotiator. One day you reach a valley that feels better. Softer grass, water nearby, game trails. The sun still burns, but there's breeze, shelter. You camp, you hunt, you stay just long enough to forget you're still moving. Then drought strikes, or flood, or a rival group drives you out. You move again. This is how humanity spreads, not in conquest, not in triumph, but in stubborn, tired footsteps. Over decades, centuries, millennia. You follow rivers. They're your lifelines. They don't just offer water, they show you the way. Animals follow them. Trees grow along them. They become the ancient highways of prehistory. Sometimes you find caves, cool, quiet, and mysterious. Some echo when you grunt. Some have bones inside, bare bones, sometimes other things. You don't ask questions, you use them. Shelter is shelter. You begin to notice seasons. You associate certain fruits with certain rains. You time your movements to herd migrations. You don't have calendars, but your memory is a surprisingly sharp tool. And so your world expands. One strange day, you see something white on the horizon. It glows. It's cold. Welcome to your first encounter with snow. It's beautiful and terrible. Your group panics. You huddle. You lose members, fingers, toes. But you also adapt. You learn to wrap yourself in hides, to build shelters deeper, to dig into snowbanks and insulate with branches. You survive. You learn. A fringe theory even suggests some early hominins may have tamed fire specifically because of their push into colder regions. The more time you spend in chillier climates, the more you prioritize flame not just for cooking, but for life itself. But fire isn't your only tool. You've become pathfinders. You remember the path you took last season. You avoid the places where a leopard dragged your cousin away. You recognize rocks, river curves, the shape of a particular hill. You mark trees. You leave behind signs, scratched bark, broken branches, stone piles. Others follow. Over time, these migratory trails become traditions. That way leads to fish. That hill means rabbits nearby. This valley, bad spirits. You pass these maps from generation to generation, not with GPS, but with stories, songs, and long serious pointing. And eventually your people become distinct from those people. Groups diverge. Diets shift. Tools evolve differently. A group that heads toward colder climates starts crafting thicker clothing. A group near the coast becomes obsessed with shellfish and develops tools for prying and scraping. It happens so gradually you barely notice it, but you are no longer one thing. You are many. Your footprints scatter across continents, and each step changes you. Your legs grow stronger. Your sense of direction sharpens. Your lungs adjust to altitude. You pass by volcanoes, glaciers, salt flats, and deserts. Each one pushes your limits and adds new entries to your mental survival manual. Fringe sites in places like Dmanisi, modern-day Georgia, suggest your kind reached the Caucasus region nearly 1.8 million years ago, which, by the way, is bananas. That's not early curiosity. That's unrelenting expansion. You didn't just explore, you occupied. You returned. You left trails. You nested. You became native to new lands. And yet deep down, that wandering pulse never fades. You're a nomad by birth, a migrant by evolution. You keep moving, sometimes not for food, not for water, just because. There's something about the edge of the horizon that calls to you, something about not knowing that makes you want to know, something almost spiritual. And this is where belief begins to brew again. That mountain too tall to climb, you call it sacred. That river that flooded last year, you say it was angry. The land isn't just terrain anymore. It's alive. You give it stories, personalities. You blame it. You thank it. You develop ritual behaviors, small acts performed before crossing a river or before hunting in a new valley. Maybe you place a stone. Maybe you sing. Maybe you hold your breath and wait for a sign. Some groups begin painting themselves ashes, ochres, crushed berries. Not for war, not for beauty. Maybe as a sign, maybe as a map, maybe just to feel different in a new place. And so bit by bit, you transform movement into identity. You are no longer just surviving. You are becoming something entirely new. An animal that can leave home and make a new one anywhere. And as the sun dips below the edge of the far ridge and the fire crackles behind you, you glance west. Or maybe east. It doesn't matter. Because wherever you're going, you're already on your way. You're cold. Not forgot my blanket, cold, bone-deep scream internally, my eyelashes are freezing cold. Snow blankets the ground in deceptive stillness, turning everything into a soft, white lie. Your breath fogs in front of you. Your skin is numb. Your knuckles crack when you move them. You're dressed in layers of stiff, smoked hides that smell like last week's antelope, but it's still not enough. And out there, watching from the shadows of a wind-whipped ridge, something worse than the cold waits. A pair of yellow eyes blink once, then vanish. Saber-toothed cats. The Ice Age has officially joined the party, and it is not here to make friends. Luckily, neither are you, because by now you've changed. Your kind has evolved again. You're likely Homo heidelbergensis, or maybe even early Homo sapiens, depending on which weird windy valley you just stumbled out of. And even though this environment could kill a rhinoceros, you're adapting faster than anything else on the continent. You don't just endure the cold, you start outsmarting it. That hide you're wearing, it's sewn. Not just wrapped and tied, stitched with bone awls and sinew thread. You've figured out how to pierce, not fasten. Some groups may even scrape hides with flint scrapers and then smoke them to make them water-resistant. Your clothing tech is officially ahead of the curve, and you're planning. You no longer wait for trouble to show up. You prepare. You build windbreaks from mammoth bones and stacked turf. You dig semi-subterranean shelters using the earth itself for insulation. Some days the snow blows sideways and buries your home, and still you dig your way out. Historians still argue whether these early Arctic-style shelters were permanent bases or seasonal camps, but either way they're signs of something new, long-term thinking. You're not just reacting, you're anticipating. Take hunting, for example. You've moved from hopeful ambushes to full-on group coordination. You track herds, you time migrations, you dig pit traps lined with sharpened stakes, then disguise them with snow and branches. You drive prey toward them. One mistake and a woolly rhino breaks a leg and falls in. Dinner is served. Well, not right away. First comes the ritual stabbing, the cautious poking the pile of celebratory grunts, and then the grim work of butchering a half-ton animal while trying not to freeze your fingers off. You roast what you can, dry the rest, store it in sealed pits or frozen stream beds. That's right, you've invented refrigeration without even realizing it. And don't forget, fire, your oldest ally. You've improved your methods. Some of you now use pyrite and flint-striking sparks deliberately. No more praying for lightning or babysitting embers all week. You're starting fire from scratch like pros. Smoke means safety. Heat, light, control. But let's talk about the big one, the thing that really shifts your survival odds. Teamwork. Out here, no one makes it alone. You hunt in groups, you share tools, you assign roles. One stays with the children, one watches the trail, one sharpens weapons. You've become the first project managers whether you meant to or not. And with teamwork comes language. Not full grammar just yet, but you're getting there. Your vocal cords have evolved. Your tongue is more flexible. Your brain, now nearly as big as a modern human's, is desperate for expression. You grunt, gesture, mimic, and over time you name things. That river bend, it has a name. That animal, that tool, that look your friend makes when she wants you to stop messing with her spear. Name, name, name. Language opens up something astonishing: memory sharing. You don't just learn from personal experience anymore, you learn from other people's stories. That's exponential intelligence. One odd little clue. Some of your cousins, the Neanderthals, are doing it too. You meet them occasionally, sometimes from afar, sometimes not. They're shorter, stockier, built for cold, stronger than you, possibly better adapted to winter. And for a long time you coexist. Sometimes you fight. Sometimes you interbreed. Yes, really, you've probably got a little Neanderthal in your DNA right now. Sometimes you trade. There's even archaeological evidence suggesting shared hunting grounds between early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, though historians still argue whether those sites were peaceful, competitive, or well, awkward. One thing's for sure: you learn from each other. You both use spears now. Not just sharpened sticks, but actual stone-tipped weapons, hardened by fire and flung with terrifying force. In some groups, you've invented the atlatl, a spear thrower that adds power and range. Predators used to chase you. Now they hesitate. Because you're no longer prey. You're a pack animal with a memory, a weapon, and a plan. But don't get cocky. The cold still hunts you. Disease still festers in your gut. Falls, infections, and bad luck can end a life before breakfast. Your shelters collapse. Your food rots. And every so often, something large and furry reminds you that extinction is still an option. And yet, you endure. Some days you look at the landscape and realize you understand it. You know where the wolves den. You know which cliffs echo when mammoths move nearby. You know where to find moss to wrap a wound, which snow to melt, which to avoid. And slowly, a strange feeling creeps in. Belonging. You don't just survive in harsh environments, now you're a part of them. That ridge is yours. That cave echoes with your laughter. That firelight dances on your tools, your faces, your sleeping children. The cold may still bite, but it no longer devours. You've carved out a place in the frost. And in doing so, you've carved out a place in history. Because these icy battlefields, these snowy plains and wind-blasted cliffs, this is where humanity proves something to the world. You can't outmuscle the wild. But if you're clever, coordinated, and just stubborn enough, you can outthink it. You're thirsty, but not grab-a-bottle thirsty. This is the kind of thirst where your tongue feels like a cracked pebble and your skin's tight as leather. The sun is a personal insult overhead. It doesn't shimmer anymore, it sizzles. Every step stirs up dust that coats your nostrils. Your lips are splitting. Your thoughts are slow. And the worst part, you don't know where the next water source is. Welcome to the water wars millions of years before irrigation filters or reusable straws. In this world, water is the god you chase, the resource that governs every choice. You don't travel for comfort. You don't settle for safety. You move for moisture. You follow the rivers. You trace dried stream beds like ancient detectives reading the clues left by cracked mud and twisted reeds. You squat by elephant tracks so deep they catch dew. You dig shallow holes in gravel beds hoping to find seepage. Sometimes you succeed. Sometimes the water is brackish or filled with wriggling creatures that taste like despair, but it's wet. You drink it anyway. Because when your kind wandered out of Africa into increasingly hostile and arid lands, the greatest threat wasn't the cold or the predators. It was dehydration. Historians still argue whether early humans moved out of necessity escaping drought or opportunity following shifting monsoons and river patterns. Probably both. Earth's climate was having a chaotic phase, swinging between wet spells and brutal dry seasons. Grasslands turned to deserts. Rivers vanished. Lakes blinked out like tired stars. And yet, you moved forward. You became a hydro tracker. You followed elephants knowing they could smell water miles away. You watched birds whose daily patterns always lead to liquid. You listened to the croaking of frogs, even the buzzing of insects, because everything in this world wants what you want. And when you found water, everything changed. You didn't just drink, you stayed. You made camp beside it, slept near it, protected it. You formed your first territorial instincts. A muddy stream might as well be gold. You defend it. You argue over it. You learn to share it or not. Your tools adapt. You hollow out gourds. You carry water in folded hides or sloshing stomach bladders, delightful, we know. You wet plant fibers and bind them around your forehead to cool yourself. You chew roots just for the moisture. And sometimes, in desperation, you drink from insect nests. Termite mounds, hollow logs, tree cavities filled with tepid, bug-filled soup. Fringe evidence even suggests early humans may have followed ancient rainfall patterns, migrating in waves that mirrored monsoons and wet-dry cycles. Your body, meanwhile, starts to change again. You sweat even more efficiently. Your kidneys become champions of water retention. No other animal does heat like you do. You're an endurance engine, water-powered and relentless. But that doesn't mean it's easy. There are moments when thirst wins. You bury a child, or a sibling, or an elder who slowed the group down. You don't have words for grief yet, but you feel the weight of it anyway. And when you leave that place, your group walks quieter. Less laughter, less bickering. Just dry lips, dry eyes, and a silence that says, keep moving. Until one day you see it. A spring, hidden behind reeds, protected by stone. Water bubbles clear and cool. The group rushes forward, but you hold back. You wait, because you know what lurks near water predators. You've lost too many to crocodiles, lions, even snakes. You've learned to watch the ripples, to listen for silence. Water means life, but it also means ambush. That's when you start to build strategy around it. You designate watchers. One group drinks while the other stands guard. You move upstream from the animals when you can to avoid contamination. You time your visits dawn and dusk when the shadows play tricks, but the herds aren't as thick. You've even learned to use smoke to purify water slightly, or at least to keep mosquitoes from laying their nasty little eggs near your camp. It's not science. It's not perfect. But it's enough to keep you alive. You also start recognizing seasonal water behavior. That stream that's dry now, it floods in spring. That basin that's cracked and useless in summer, it'll shimmer like a mirror when the rains return. Your memory is your map. Your stories are your compass. And the older ones, they remember the last drought. The flood before that. The year the river turned sour. They tell these stories at night, and the children listen because their lives depend on it. These stories evolve into myth. You personify the water. You fear it. You bless it. Maybe you make offerings to it, food, feathers, stones arranged just so. Maybe you bathe in it when you find plenty, not just to clean, but to connect. water becomes sacred. And it gives you something else: reflection. Literally. For the first time, you see your own face twisted and muddy and strange in the surface of a pool. You don't understand what you're seeing at first. Is it another person? A spirit, a threat, but over time the idea forms, that's me. Fringe anthropologists suggest this moment of self-recognition could have been tied to water. Not just a mirror, but a portal. Early humans may have believed water held spirits, or that the double in the pool was a kind of guardian or shadow. The earliest evidence of burial near water supports this. The dead are placed close to rivers, springs, and deltas. Perhaps to keep them cool. Perhaps to return them to the source. Or perhaps, just perhaps, because water has always been more than survival. It's identity. You don't just walk to water anymore. You build your life around it. You draw lines in the sand. You say, this is ours. Not with words, but with presence. Camps, bones, fires that smolder for weeks. You carve symbols into rock walls near the stream's edge. Simple shapes, spirals, arcs. They mean something. Or maybe they're just for beauty. Either way, you've claimed a piece of the planet. And when the rains finally come, when thunder rolls and the sky cracks open and water pours in biblical fury, you don't just panic. You dance. You laugh like a mad thing. You run in it. You drink from cupped hands. You smear mud on your face and hoot at the sky because for now, for one rare moment in the brutal prehistory of your species, you are not thirsty. And that's worth remembering. You hear them before you see them. A strange rhythm in the distance, heavy footfalls, deep grunts, and the unmistakable crack of a rock on bone. Your group halts, eyes narrow. You squat low in the tall grass, and slowly, silently, you peek through the reeds. They're massive. Not elephants, not lions, not even buffalo. Neanderthals. Your distant cousins. Broad shoulders, barrel chests. Thick limbs like tree trunks. Their skin is pale under the overcast sky, and their movements are slower than yours, but more precise. Each one carries something heavy, a spear, a slab of meat, a stone core the size of your head. They're camped near the river you've been tracking for days, and they're not leaving. So now comes the big question: do you share the continent or fight for it? You are Homo sapiens, leaner, more wiry, faster on your feet. They're Homo neanderthalensis, stocky, stronger, built for endurance and cold. You're both clever. You both make tools. You both have fire. And for the first time, your species has to ask what happens when intelligence meets a mirror. The archaeological record is both murky and mesmerizing. Historians still argue whether Homo sapiens and Neanderthals coexisted, peacefully, clashed constantly, or awkwardly circled each other for millennia. The answer? Probably yes to all three, depending on the time, the place, and the mood. Sometimes you trade. They have fresh hide. You've got dry roots and a carved tool you're secretly very proud of. You grunt, gesture offer. They accept. Sort of. You leave with less than you hoped, but not with a spear in your chest, so win. Other times it's not so friendly. Maybe they were here first. Maybe they see you as invaders. Maybe you're just both starving, and there's only one half-rotted mammoth carcass to fight over. Whatever the reason, stones are thrown. Spears fly. Blood is spilled. And in those moments you realize something terrifying. They are as clever as you are. They track just as well. They remember paths. They lay traps. Their tools are different, but just as effective. Their spears are heavier, built for close quarters. They get close fast. When you fight, it's not instinct versus instinct. It's mind versus mind. But there are differences too. They speak, or at least communicate well, but your people are developing something richer. Your vocal range is wider, your gestures more layered. You've begun using symbols, paint carvings, even worn jewelry. Shells, beads, marks that mean this is mine or this is us. Some fringe theories suggest Neanderthals painted themselves too, maybe even painted caves, but there's no clear consensus. What is clear, you're both capable of abstract thought, and now you're stuck on the same landmass. You try avoiding them. You take the higher paths, the marshier valleys, the cliffs no sane person would climb. Your feet bleed, your stomach growls. But you live. Sometimes you find their camps after they've moved on. Fire pits, cracked bones, charcoal drawings, scratches really on the wall of a shelter. One of your companions stares at the marks longer than necessary. Maybe they feel familiar. Maybe they're just creepy. Other times, your groups merge. It's rare, fragile, tense, but it happens. And when it does, things get complicated because your species can interbreed. Genetic evidence confirms it. If you're alive today, congrats. You've likely got a sliver of Neanderthal DNA in you, skin traits, immune system quirks, maybe even your ability to cope with high altitudes or metabolize certain foods. Tiny ancestral gifts left behind after ancient meetings under ancient stars. But let's not romanticize it too much. These encounters weren't always mutual. They weren't always kind. Prehistoric relationships didn't come with consent forms. Power dynamics were muddy, and survival often trumped affection. Still, there's something poignant about it. You didn't just fight or flee. You merged, blurred lines, birthed hybrids. You complicated the narrative. The Neanderthal story didn't end cleanly, it faded into yours. Back in your current camp, your group talks about them. Not in words, but in shared looks, mimicked gestures, caution, sometimes respect, sometimes mockery. You imitate their gait, their deep voices, their slow tool work. Everyone laughs, until they show up again and no one's laughing. You notice that your people are moving faster now, covering more ground, carrying more things. You're becoming nomads with intention. You've learned how to build portable shelters, simple frames, hide coverings, things you can roll pack, rebuild. And when you see a Neanderthal camp, you move around it. The cold still bites. The hunt still fails. But somehow you thrive. Your group size is increasing. Your foraging is broader. You're fishing. You're setting traps. You're eating everything, even things that make other species gag. That mushroom. You test a tiny bite. Wait, no vomiting. Great. Add it to the menu. It's not glamorous, but it's evolution. Neanderthals, on the other hand, seem to stick to what they know. They thrive in familiar terrain, cold forests, caves, herd paths. They're slower to adapt, less experimental, more conservative in the survival sense. And over time, that difference widens. One winter, you return to a valley you knew they occupied, but it's empty. No tracks, no fire pits, just silence. You walk past without comment, but you wonder, did they leave, starve, get pushed out? You'll never know. But what you do know is this: your group has fire, tools, ritual, language, symbol, and now it has space. The world is opening up little by little, not because it changed, but because you did. You outlast the cold. You outmaneuver the predators. You even quietly, respectfully, brutally outlive your cousins. You don't mourn them. Not really. But sometimes when the wind howls just right outside your cave, you remember their voices, their songs, Their spear tips and strange eyes, their shadows, and somewhere deep in your future DNA, they still walk beside you. Your fingers are stained red, not with blood for once, but with ochre pulverized iron-rich earth mixed with spit and smeared in looping spirals across the wall of your camp. You don't know why you're doing this. Not really. It's not for food. It's not for warmth. But it feels important. So you keep going. And just like that, with one crude streak of color, you've stepped into something sacred art. Ritual. Expression. Let's not oversell it, you're not painting the Sistine Chapel here. But your people are starting to decorate. Your shelters aren't just places to sleep anymore. They're becoming spaces, personal, social, almost spiritual. And Firefire turns them into theaters. Because here's the new nightly routine: you gather close. You eat roasted roots, cracked marrow, smoked meat. And then you tell stories. Not with full sentences, not with grammar, but with gesture, sound, and firelight. You mimic the way an antelope runs. You grunt like the lion who chased you last moon. You show how your cousin fell in the river again, and everyone howls with laughter. And above you, the cave walls begin to fill with handprints, animal outlines, wavy patterns that might mean river or run, or maybe just look at this cool thing I drew. Historians still debate what these markings mean. Were they symbolic? Did they mark territory? Were they simple graffiti or sacred rites? The truth is, no one knows. But they keep showing up over and over in caves from France to Indonesia. And that tells us one thing. You're not just surviving anymore. You're remembering. You even start creating things just for the sake of it. Beads made from shells, bone pendants, feathers tied into hair. Your people begin assigning value to objects that serve no direct survival function, which means you've discovered a new kind of power meaning. Now, let's talk about fire again, because it's still your #1 MVP. You don't just cook with it, you shape with it. You harden wooden spears by holding them over flames. You light controlled blazes to flush animals from brush. You char the ends of digging sticks to toughen them. And you experiment burning different woods to see which smells sweet, which smokes less, which burns longer. You even find a certain kind of black stone obsidian. When fractured just right, it becomes sharper than anything you've ever touched. Sharper than modern scalpels, in fact. You don't know what it is, but when you cut meat with it, it slides clean. You save it. You show others. And now your tools evolve again. No more random rocks. Now you craft. You flake specific stones. You choose based on sharpness, weight, feel. You begin to make composite tools, a spear with a wooden shaft, stone point, and plant fiber binding. You are now, by all technical definitions, a technologist. Quirky fact, some of your adhesives use tree resin mixed with ash and beeswax. That's chemistry, without the goggles. And what do you do with your new tools? You hunt more. But not just with spears. You start to set traps. You dig pits. You design weighted snares. You lay sharpened sticks across animal trails camouflaged with grass. You don't wait for food to stumble into your path. You engineer its demise. Even your shelters are changing. No more simple lean-tos. You build semi-permanent structures, circles of stone, stacked branches, hides stretched tight. You align entrances to block the wind. You add layers of bedding leaves, grass fur. You even dig shallow fire pits inside with smoke holes above. It's not a house, but it's home. And then one night someone picks up a chunk of charcoal from the fire, walks to the wall, and draws a handprint. Not just by placing their hand in pigment, but by spraying around it, blowing ochre from their mouth, outlining the fingers. It's a signature, a whisper of selfhood. You've created something no other species has ever done, an echo of identity. Historians call these negative hand stencils, and they're found in caves across multiple continents, across tens of thousands of years. Some are so small they likely belong to children, others to elders. A few seem to be repeated same hand, different places. Why no one agrees? Some think it was territorial. Others say spiritual. Maybe you just wanted to say I was here. Maybe it was about belonging, or memory, or the beginning of belief in something beyond the flesh. Whatever it was, it stuck. Because from here on out, you don't just live in your world, you decorate it. And as that fire crackles and your painted hands glow on the wall, you realize something else. This is yours, the cave, the group, the memory, the future. You've begun to tie your identity to place. You even name landmarks now, silently or not. You remember the Sleeping Bear Hill. You guide others to Bone Tooth Cave. You point at constellations and give them shapes. Fringe researchers suggest these early spatial names may have been musical, built into chants or walking songs that helped guide long-distance movement. Imagine that navigation through rhythm. You've also begun healing, not just enduring wounds, but treating them. You chew bitter plants that numb pain. You wrap wounds in moss and bind them with hide. You notice that ash keeps infection away, that cold slows swelling. One day you carve a groove into a piece of bone. You thread a cord through it. You tie it around your wrist. Not to heal, not to survive, but just because it looks good. You've created adornment. And from here, the slope toward culture gets slippery. You start carving animals out of bone. You make flutes from bird wings. You scratch patterns into rocks, bones, and even your own skin. The patterns are meaningless, or maybe too meaningful, because now you live in a world of symbols, where a painted hand might mean me or us, or don't forget. And one day, thousands of years from now, someone will crawl into this cave, flashlight in hand, and find your marks on the wall. And they'll whisper quietly, "Someone lived here." You're hungry. Not the kind of hunger that makes you daydream about figs or roasted tubers, but the kind that makes your body feel hollow, your breath short, your thoughts thick and slow like river mud. The last hunt failed. The traps came up empty. Even the insects have vanished from under the bark. The land is still, too still. You're in what will someday be called a famine cycle, and out here there are no food banks. Just hope, strategy, and that strange grinding genius your species keeps leaning on adaptation. You scan the landscape like a scavenger. Scratch that you are a scavenger now. There's no pride when your stomach's twisting like a snake in a sack. And so you do what any hungry, pre-modern, deeply desperate human would do. You get creative, a beetle, crunch it, a pile of droppings. Dig through it. Hyenas don't always finish their meals. Bones left behind by vultures. Smash 'em open. Marrow is meat's shy cousin hiding in plain sight. Welcome to the original Hunger Games Stone Age edition. There are no rules, no alliances, and no prizes. Just you, your group, and the constant low growl of collective emptiness. But here's the twist: you win. Not by strength, but by inventiveness. Because when the meat's gone, you remember the seeds, the bitter roots, the bark that makes you gag unless it's boiled twice. Your group has learned to process food, detoxify it. You soak, roast, ferment, chew, and spit dry, pound. You turn nearly inedible plants into passable meals. And in doing so, you do something extraordinary. You expand your diet far beyond what any other predator or prey would tolerate. That's your secret weapon. You're not just a carnivore or herbivore. You're an everything Ivor, a kitchen sink forager, the Swiss Army knife of consumption. There's even a quirky archaeological discovery: burned remains of starchy plants like wild potatoes found in ancient hearths. No, you're not making French fries, but you are grinding roots into paste, smearing it on hot rocks, and calling it dinner. One of you starts mashing seeds with a flat stone. Another grabs a rounder rock and joins in. That rhythmic thump, thump, thump becomes background music for survival. Congratulations, you've invented the mortar and pestle. Historians still argue whether cooking starchy plants sparked population growth or followed it. But what's certain is this: the moment you start prepping your food, you unlock more calories. And when every bite matters, that's a game changer. Your group moves differently during famines. You fan out, split into smaller units, cover more ground. Someone walks all day just to return with a handful of grubs. That person celebrated like a hero. A hero with dirt under their fingernails and something suspicious wriggling in their mouth. You also begin to test limits. Can you eat that frog? Maybe. Can you dry that fish you found half-eaten? Probably. Can you cook that weird fungus without dying? Let's find out. This is how culinary knowledge forms trial error and a few funerals. Eventually, the dangerous meals get avoided, the good ones remembered, and the best ones shared. And food, once just fuel, becomes social capital. You start remembering who brought what, who hoarded, who shared, who found something conveniently after someone else died. These things matter. They change how people look at you, treat you, trust you. That trust. It's a kind of currency. The ones who feed others become leaders, or at least less likely to be left behind when things go south. Your tools adapt, too. You sharpen blades not just for skinning, but for slicing plants. You dig with sticks shaped like shovels. You tie woven baskets from reeds to carry food back. You even start storing it, drying meat on sun-warmed rocks, tucking seeds in tree crevices. And when animals are scarce, you turn predator into trap setter. You build snares with bent saplings and woven cords. You carve deadfalls, rocks rigged to crush anything curious enough to sniff. You learn animal behavior down to the hour. You know when the rabbits come, when the birds rest, when the fish spawn. You're a full-time forager, part-time assassin. There's evidence of early humans stacking stones along migration paths to funnel animals into kill zones. It's not brute force, it's architecture, and it works. You might go days without food, but then feast. One antelope provides marrow organs, muscle, hide, bone, sinew, horn. Nothing is wasted, not even the brain, which you crack open and share like the world's most disturbing delicacy. And afterward, you celebrate. You sing. You slap each other's shoulders. You imitate the animal's death with overly dramatic flailing. You laugh. Because hunger teaches you this. Joy is sharper after pain. You've also learned to fake plenty when necessary. During lean times, you keep the fire high, the camp loud. Why? To fool predators into thinking you're strong, fed, dominant, even when your ribs show. Deception is part of your toolkit now. You bluff with noise, with fire, with numbers, with stories. That's right, even in famine, your group tells stories. About past hunts, legendary ancestors, the time someone mistook a skunk for a rabbit and paid the price. Stories give you identity. They make you feel bigger than the hunger. And eventually, the hunger passes. The animals return. The rains come. The plants regrow. But you remember the lean times. You store food now. You notice signs earlier: wilting leaves, dry, winds, disappearing birds. You prepare. And in doing so, you become something far more powerful than predator or prey. You become resilient. Because where others starve, you adapt. Where others die, you learn. Where others wait, you invent. That's what hunger does to your kind. It doesn't just thin your frame or sharpen your senses. It sculpts your mind. And deep in the ashes of your fire pit, beside the bones and cracked stones, lies a truth: you are never more human than when you are desperate and still trying. The river dried up weeks ago. What used to be a winding silver thread is now a dusty scar across the valley. The trees are leafless. The sky is quiet, too quiet. Even the insects have retreated, leaving behind a brittle silence. You stand there, squinting at the horizon, sweat drying faster than your body can replace it. This isn't just a bad season. This is a climate shift, and your kind has no choice but to adapt again. But this time you do it smarter, because now you're not reacting with panic. You're observing, preparing, reshaping your life to bend around the changes. This is DIY climate adaptation, and you little barefoot mammal with a big brain are going to engineer survival where most species wouldn't bother. Earth has always been moody. For the last million years or so, your ancestors have been living through swings that make modern weather forecasts look laughably tame. Glacial periods, droughts, rainforest collapses, tectonic hiccups, supervolcanoes. Historians still argue whether your big cognitive leap came from one massive environmental upheaval or a series of smaller ones. But they agree on this: stress shapes intelligence. And today, the stress is real. First thing you do, you move. You abandon the old patterns, the migration paths you knew, the rivers you trusted, the plants you counted on gone. You scout new land. You risk strange climates. Your group climbs higher ventures, deeper, follows animal trails into unknown forests. And you observe everything: where the deer drink, where the wind cools, which plants wither first, which roots remain edible even when the ground cracks. Your brain becomes a climate database. You start experimenting. That plant that made your cousin sick last year, you try roasting it instead of eating it raw. It still tastes awful, but you don't vomit. Success. That hide you've been using as a blanket, you stitch two together. Add bark inside for insulation. Boom. Layered clothing. Your shelters change too. You build wind-proof barriers, stack stones, higher angle entrances away from sandstorms. Some groups even begin digging semi-underground shelters, part den, part bunker. In colder climates, your people line the walls with hides and moss. In dry heat, you construct shady canopies open at both ends to catch the breeze. Shade becomes currency. Fringe theories suggest that even nomadic route changes where you traveled when were planned not just by seasons, but by wind behavior, cloud patterns, and insect activity. Yes. You watched the bugs, because when they disappear, something's wrong. The group dynamic shifts. You develop specialists, those who know plants, those who watch the sky, those who remember past droughts. The old ones, they're now libraries. They know where the last spring held water during the last dry season. They recall the smell of incoming storms. You don't revere them because they're old. You revere them because they've seen things. And then comes the real leap. You begin to store knowledge physically. Not writing, not yet. But you mark. Scorched trees near poisonous plants. Stone stacks near safe water. Patterns etched into bone, into wood, into rock, signs only your group understands. A loop means shelter here. 3 slashes mean don't eat that. A spiral. Maybe circle back later. Are these writing sorts? By modern standards. But they are memory made visible. And memory becomes the most important survival tool you own. Because climate doesn't hit all at once. It creeps. It teases. It punishes the unprepared. You start to anticipate. Storm coming. You stash meat higher in the rocks. Drought ahead. You dig pits, now cover them. Check them later. Cold on the horizon. You trap smaller game, now store it. Dried, smoked, buried in cool caves. Your relationship with animals changes too. You follow migrating herds not just as predators but as indicators. When they move, something's coming. When they stop moving, something's wrong. And here's the subtle, sneaky shift. You stop just surviving nature. You start reading it. Somewhere in a windswept valley, one of your kin watches birds circle and predicts rain. Somewhere else, someone places a stone in the ground because they think it helps the sun return. Both are acts of climate interpretation. One observational, one spiritual. Both matter, because your emotional intelligence is evolving too. You're not just clever, you're starting to be superstitious. You link weather with action. Bad harvest with a broken taboo. The end of a good hunting season with someone failing to perform the right gesture. These aren't logical steps, but they give you a sense of control. And that sense, it's powerful. Rituals emerge. Before the rains, you smear red ochre on your face. Not because it summons rain, but because your ancestors did it when the rains came. You copy them. You honor the past, even when the skies don't care. This isn't science, it's proto-religion, but it works. Not to change the weather, but to hold the group together during terrifying shifts. Ritual gives you unity, meaning, and psychological armor against things you can't fight. Even death starts to feel less random. You bury the dead with items, tools, food, maybe a shell, maybe a bead. Because maybe, just maybe, they're going somewhere. And if they're not, well, burying them gently still feels better than dropping them in a ravine. You're learning to care for the future, even when you're not in it. Which brings us to the next twist. You plan for descendants. You don't just build for today's shelter, you leave tools behind for tomorrow's rain. You shape land not just for this season, but so your group remembers how to use it when it's dry again. You begin passing down instructions, not just knowledge. And slowly, painfully, you realize you can't stop the sky. You can't argue with the soil, but you can prepare your kind to survive it again. You are no longer reacting to climate. You are engineering your life around it. And when the clouds finally break, when the first fat drops fall on your face and steam rises from the hot dirt, you don't just drink the rain. You remember it. You record it. You carry it with you into the next generation. Because now you're not just weathering the earth. You're shaping how your people understand it. You're trying to sleep. But there's a snoring child in your armpit. Two elders muttering about meat rations in the dark. And someone outside the shelter is definitely crying. Again. Welcome to prehistoric domestic bliss. Tonight's not about mammoths or meteors. No, this is the stuff they don't paint on cave walls. This is the nomad's guide to family drama, where every shelter is a cramped reality show and nobody gets voted off. You're in a tight-knit group now, maybe 20 to 40 people, depending on the season, and how well you're all getting along. There's no privacy, no doors, no soundproofing. Every argument, every bad joke, every awkward cough is a shared experience. And it works, mostly, because over time your survival doesn't just depend on tools and tracking. It depends on social complexity. You've evolved into a species that thrives in community. Your children are born more helpless than ever, needing constant care, food, and those little forehead pats that mean you didn't die today. Good job. One adult can't raise a child alone, not even two. You need allo-parenting grandmothers, aunts, teenage siblings, even that one quiet guy who's weirdly good with kids. Everyone helps. Everyone watches. You're inventing the village one sleepless night at a time. Historians still argue whether the long childhood of Homo sapiens is a side effect of big brains or a driver of social bonding, but either way, it's clear more babies meant more babysitters. More babysitters meant more cohesion, and sometimes more resentment. Because not everyone agrees on how to raise a proto-toddler who thinks sharp rocks are delicious. One person insists on breast milk, another swears by mashed root. Someone else just mutters, "Let the spirits decide," and walks away. Cue the first documented case of passive-aggressive grunting. You've developed roles even if you don't call them that. Some are better hunters. Others are foragers. Some are the fire keepers, the hide tanners, the story repeaters. One old woman doesn't do much walking anymore, but she remembers every cave you've used for the past decade. She's priceless, and she knows it. One night she tells a story to the children about a great fire that once chased the group from their cave, about the time a boy spoke to a mountain and it answered with rain. The kids listen wide-eyed. Someone scoffs. Someone else cries. You're not just teaching facts anymore. You're shaping identity. And at the center of this chaotic web, emotion. Love, jealousy, grief, annoyance, these are now daily parts of your experience. You form attachments. When someone dies, you ache. When someone wanders off and doesn't return, you wait longer than necessary, just in case. Even your rivalries have depth now. That guy who always eats more than he contributes, he's still part of the group. That woman who doesn't speak much, but always brings food. You trust her the most. This is emotional memory. The ability to track not just who did what, but how they made you feel. That changes everything. Because now you're not just surviving with people, you're surviving through them. And sometimes it gets messy. Fights break out, over mates, over meat, over perceived slights. Someone thinks someone else is getting too much respect. Someone else is suspected of hoarding honey. But here's the twist: your group rarely splits. You argue, but you also repair. Through sharing humor, songs, mutual suffering, or just that awkward "I brought you this weird mushroom I found" gesture that basically means sorry. You're inventing conflict resolution in its rawest form. And with that comes another innovation: ritualized bonding. You dance, you sing, you share food in circles. You hold hands before a hunt, or when a child is sick. You paint each other's faces. You mimic animals together. These aren't practical skills, they're emotional glue. And sometimes you fall in love. Not always romantically, not always equally, but you form pair bonds. Some are temporary, some last for years, some fade without notice. And when they break, you feel it deeply. You may not have a word for heartbreak, but your behavior shows it. Isolation, anger, distraction. You've created attachment theory 40,000 years ahead of schedule. It gets even weirder. One night, 2 members of the group returned from a scouting trip. One brought back meat. The other brought nothing but tells a captivating story about a dream they had beside a cliff. Everyone listens. And afterward, they treat that person a little differently. Maybe they're touched, special, important. You've just nominated your first spiritual leader, or con artist. Either way, it works. Even lullabies enter the scene. You hum to babies to calm them. You murmur nonsense sounds in rhythmic patterns. They don't understand the words, if there are any, but the tone, the melody, the meaning it gets through. You're creating emotional language long before dictionaries. Fringe anthropologists even suggest some early songs were navigational melodies that matched the rhythm of a path, a river, a seasonal trail, singing your way home. sound as GPS. Meanwhile, your group practices play. Children chase each other, throw sticks, pretend to hunt. Adults join in sometimes. It's not wasted energy, it's practice. It's bonding. It's joy. Joy is survival. And within this churning social soup, you create the first stories about who you are. We come from the Eastern River. Our mother was born under the fire cave. We are the ones who outlasted the lion. These aren't just boasts. They're cultural DNA carried in memory, passed in whispers and worn like invisible armor. And when the drought comes, you endure. When someone leaves, you tell their story. When a child asks, "Why is the moon broken?" you answer. Not with fact, but with a story that holds meaning. Because now meaning matters more than truth. And truth is starting to sound a lot like bedtime. You're crouched by a stream holding a stone in your hand. Not just any stone, the stone. Your favorite. It's smooth on one side, sharp on the other, and fits perfectly in your palm like it was made for you. Today, you're not just smashing bones with it. You're shaping it. And the sound it makes, tap, tap, crack, is your new language. Welcome to the age of tools so sharp they made you smarter. Let's be clear, you've been using tools for ages now. But this is different. This is refinement. You're no longer just hitting stuff and hoping. You're selecting the right stone, choosing the perfect angle, the exact amount of force. You're designing. What's in your hands now is a modeled thought, an idea made physical. And that friend is alchemy. You've graduated from the rough and ready Oldowan tools to the sleeker, deadlier Aculean hand axes. Think teardrop-shaped, razor-edged, and versatile enough to slice meat, dig roots, skin animals, or give someone a very bad day. Historians still argue whether these hand axes had status value, whether they were part tool, part flex. But the uniformity across thousands of miles suggests something more: shared intelligence. Your tools are now standardized. That means you're teaching others, watching, copying, improving. And if you're really on the cutting edge, pun absolutely intended, you're crafting composite tools, spear points of flint tied to wooden shafts with sinew and plant resin. That's right, glue made from nature's finest goo and a little fire-based chemistry. You're no longer just using what the land gives. You're modifying it. There's even fringe evidence of tool workshops, specific zones littered with flakes, cores, and half-finished implements. Entire areas dedicated to crafting like early pop-up factories with dirt floors and aggressive mosquitoes. It's not just about function anymore. It's about precision. And precision equals power. Because now, with a few good rocks and some patience, you can craft weapons that bring down animals 10 times your size. You're not chasing anymore. You're ambushing, planning, engineering your way to survival. Your brain loves this. Every chip off the stone triggers complex decision-making, visual spatial reasoning, long-term planning. These aren't just survival skills. They're neural workouts. Your prefrontal cortex is bulking up. Your problem solving is on point. You're inventing not because you have to, but because you can. And here's the wild part. Every time you pass that knowledge on, every time someone younger watches you flake a blade just right, they learn more than how to make a tool. They learn how to think. And with that comes something unexpected. Status. Suddenly, the best toolmaker isn't just useful, they're admired. You gather around them, you trade with them, you imitate them. Their tools are sharper, more symmetrical, lighter to carry. Sometimes their craftsmanship is so good, it doesn't even get used. It just gets shown. Congratulations, you've invented the prehistoric influencer. And yes, we're talking about rocks. One especially fascinating clue. Some Aculean hand axes found at sites are too large to be practical. Gorgeous, symmetrical, and completely useless in real-world situations. So why make them as a display of skill? Maybe as a gift. Maybe as a weird, flinty version of courtship. Look at this shiny, symmetrical object I made. Mate with me. We can't prove it. But we do know this. You're now using tools as more than tools. You're using them as symbols. And once symbols enter the chat, everything changes. You carve marks on bone, scratches that may mean territory or stories or time. You arrange stones in patterns. You decorate tools with ochre, maybe with feathers, maybe with grooves that serve no purpose except to look cool. Now you're blending function with form, art with utility. One day you sit beside a fire with a blade you just made. You flip it over, admire the symmetry. You don't need another blade right now, but you still keep working, sharpening, improving. Why? Because it feels satisfying. You're making something just to make it better, and that's a new kind of thinking. Later that evening, another member of your group borrows one of your tools. They cut meat with it. The cut is clean. They look at you differently afterward. A nod, a look of respect. That's social currency earned through skill. You're no longer just surviving through strength or luck. Now you rise through craft. Tool makers become advisors, maybe even leaders. You don't carry titles, but everyone knows who can sharpen a spear, fix a snapped shaft, nap a new flake in the middle of a storm. And you begin to name your tools, not out loud, not with words exactly, but with gestures, with nicknames. This one cuts bones. That one is for fish. You start to sort them, store them, protect them. They are no longer just extensions of your hand. They are extensions of your mind. Eventually, you pass a tool down to someone younger, not because they asked, but because they watched, because they're ready, because the tradition matters. That's not just inheritance. That's legacy. And when they use it, when they change it, you feel a strange mix of pride and horror. They've made it smaller, sharper, different, better. You're not sure, but they're thinking now, like you did, like someone before you did. And that long chain of chipped stone and clever hands. It's the story of humanity. A story not written in ink or blood, but carved stroke by stroke into the bones of the earth. You wake up to a smell you recognize instantly, smoke, cooked meat, and something slightly off. You roll over, pull the hide tighter across your shoulders, and listen. Voices, not your groups. Deeper, more nasal. Not far away either. Strangers. And they're not passing through. They're staying. Not just for the night. Not just to fill their water skins. They've got shelters, real ones, circular ones, with layered stones and thatched coverings. Someone has set up a fire pit with ash so old the grass has stopped growing around it. Bones piled near the edge sorted. A perimeter of carefully stacked stones that looks a lot like a wall. You've just stumbled into something revolutionary, the first proto-village. It's not quite a city, not quite permanent, and certainly not organized by any zoning department. But this little cluster of stubborn humans with their smoky dens and trash piles, they've stopped moving. Historians still argue when exactly humans began semi-permanent settlement, but sites like Ohalo II, in modern-day Israel, and Göbekli Tepe, farther along the human timeline, suggest it started much earlier than expected. Maybe even before agriculture. Why? Because even without farming, certain places just worked. A good water source, a herd migration path, trees for shade, rocks for tools. If the land keeps giving, why leave? Your people visit these settlements seasonally. Some of them are friendly, some of them are suspicious. But one thing is certain, they've changed the rules. You can feel it in the way they look at you, like you're still a traveler, still temporary, still wandering. They've built something, a rhythm, a system, a home. And it's not just the shelters, it's the rubbish. There's a pile of shells near the river that smells like death. Old fish bones cracked open for marrow scattered like ruins of past dinners. Broken tools, discarded clothes, burned twigs, even a few fossilized feces. You're standing in one of humanity's first garbage heaps. It's disgusting, and it's data. Future archaeologists will obsess over these middens. They'll sift them for signs of diet culture ritual. But right now, they just smell terrible. Still, you're fascinated. Because this place tells a story. You see evidence of division of labor. One corner is full of child-sized footprints. Another is blackened from constant fire use. One structure is walled off more tightly, maybe for food storage, maybe for tools, maybe for someone who doesn't want to be bothered. There's even a design to it. Paths beaten down from repeated movement. Fire pits clustered close, perhaps, to share warmth. Sleeping areas built higher away from damp ground. It's not a city, but it's a start. And it messes with your brain, because you were raised to keep moving, to follow the herds, chase the rains, flee the threats. Settling feels unnatural. But these people, they seem relaxed. They have baskets full of seeds, tanned hides drying on frames, clay pots warming near the fire. One person has braided grasses into cords. Another is carving a totem from wood. They're still surviving, but they're also creating. Fringe researchers suggest this kind of early sedentism wasn't about farming, it was about abundance. When resources were unusually rich, people could afford to linger. And when they lingered, things began to accumulate. Tools, food, bones, people. You ask yourself, is this safer or just slower? Because with staying comes territory. And with territory comes conflict. You've heard stories. A group upriver hoarding a salt spring. Another group cutting trees across the animal paths. One man was speared for taking too many roots from a shared zone. Settling down doesn't remove danger, it concentrates it. But it also opens the door to new things. You notice a woman wearing a string of beads around her neck. Their polished uniform, beautiful. Not for hunting, not for storage, just for meaning. You want to ask her about them, but she doesn't speak your dialect, and she's busy grinding seeds into paste. So you just watch. Later, someone offers you fermented berries. You sip carefully. It's sour, fizzy, slightly intoxicating. Everyone laughs at your face, you laugh too. Because even though you're still a nomad, part of you understands this place. You can imagine returning here, sleeping in one of these pits, adding your bones to the trash pile someday. That night, as your group camps just outside the circle of huts, you talk in whispers. You mimic the villagers, their food, their weird pots, their fancy beads, and someone says it. What if we made our own, not now, but someday? That's the seed. And once planted, it grows. The next valley you visit, you stay a few days longer. You stack some stones. You pile wood. You clear a space. You mark it. And so it begins a transition, from camp to outpost, from circle of travelers to circle of builders. You're not done migrating, but you're imagining return points, favorite shelters, that place by the cold spring, that hill with the slanted sun. You leave tools behind on purpose, fire-hardened spears, grinding stones, little gifts for the future version of you. You're not building a city, you're building continuity. And that continuity is how civilization begins. Not with kings, not with monuments, but with fire pits and garbage piles. You're standing in front of a rock that looks like it's judging you. It's just a boulder squat, sun-bleached, maybe streaked with bird droppings, but something about it feels important. It's the way it sits, immovable, like it's always been here, like it knows things. You take a few steps back, then forward. Then you press your palm to it and whisper something you don't entirely understand. That's how it starts. The first spark of belief. Tonight's story is about superstition and stone gods, the invisible rules, strange rituals, and whispered stories that early humans began to tell when survival wasn't enough anymore. When you started asking not how to live, but why. Because by now you've seen too much. You've watched healthy people die suddenly. You've seen storms wipe out food supplies. You've walked past the same animal tracks over and over until they vanish like ghosts. And you've felt it too, that heavy silence before a predator strikes. That eerie calm after lightning. That unexplainable shiver in a perfectly warm cave. And somewhere along the line you started connecting the dots. Not always correctly, but convincingly. Every time we hunt without painting our faces, we lose someone. Every time we travel east before the full moon, the water dries up. Every time we forget to leave a bone near the fire, the animals disappear. Correlation. Coincidence, you don't care. Because ritual is comfort. And comfort means survival. So now before a hunt, someone smears ochre on their chest and draws lines across their face. No one questions it. Before crossing a river, you place a stone on the bank. Before entering a cave, you whisper to the entrance. These aren't rules. They're agreements with the unknown. Historians still argue whether these early rituals were religion or proto-science. Were you honoring gods or just trying to make sense of chaos? Maybe both. Because when you don't know why the world does what it does, making stories is the only way to stay sane. Like that boulder. A few days after you whispered to it, a storm passed you by. Coincidence, maybe. But now others start leaving offerings, feathers, cracked bones, bits of honeycomb. The boulder gets a new name, the one that watches. It's a rock. You know it's a rock. But also, it isn't. You've entered a new cognitive territory, now animism. The belief that the world is alive with spirits, intentions, moods. Trees whisper, rivers judge, winds remember. You don't worship them the way future priests will, but you respect them. You negotiate, and you give shape to your fear. A mountain becomes a giant sleeping face. A storm is an angry ancestor. A streak of light in the sky. A sign. What kind? Depends who's watching. One of your companions claims to dream of fire that walks. Another says they spoke to a dead sibling in the river. Do you believe them? That's not the point. The point is that everyone listens, because dreams now matter. Not just as stories, but as warnings, maps, omens. Fringe theorists suggest early shamans, if we can even call them that, emerged first as the ones who dreamed weird and got results. Someone with a limp and 1,000-yard stare who muttered to stones and somehow always knew where to find berries. You gave them space and food and respect. Even if they were definitely a little strange. They weren't just spiritual. They were psychologists long before the word existed. They helped explain grief, fear, confusion. And when someone died suddenly, violently, or mysteriously, they were the ones who said, it was the wrong day to enter the cave. He broke the taboo. She was taken by the spirits, and you believed them. Not because it made logical sense, but because it gave you closure. You needed that, especially now when the group's gotten big enough to start disagreeing about meanings. One rock might be sacred to you. Another might be cursed to someone else. That path you walk before every successful hunt, someone else says it's dangerous. And so begins the ritual arms race. You carve shapes into stone spirals, zigzags symbols that mean protect us or bring luck or don't eat me. You tie feathers to branches. You bury special stones beneath your shelters. You carry carved figures in your pouch. One day a child is born with a birthmark shaped like a circle. You all stare. Someone says, "That's the sign of the water spirit." Everyone nods. From that moment on, that child is different. Maybe chosen, maybe feared, definitely watched. You've created mythological identity, and it's addictive because it explains things logic can't, like why some people recover from injury and others don't, why the moon disappears and returns, why a certain bird call always seems to come before a storm. These are not scientific conclusions, but they are emotional truths. They make your group feel more connected, more ordered, less small. And over time, these rituals start being passed down. Not just beliefs, but behaviors. Before you go into the forest, touch the tree with the white bark. Don't step over sleeping fires. Don't say the name of the mountain at night. They're superstitions, yes, but they serve a purpose. They keep you cautious. They keep you aligned. They keep you human. Because whether or not the stone god watches, you act like it does. And that's enough to keep the darkness from swallowing you whole. Someone just said your name. Not a grunt. Not a whistle or a point or a raised eyebrow. A word, made of sounds, shaped by breath, carried through the air and aimed specifically at you. You turn, and just like that, language has arrived. Well, sort of. You're not busting out Shakespearean sonnets just yet, but something monumental is happening in your throat, your brain, and the space between you and the people you rely on. You're learning to talk. Real structured communication has been brewing for thousands of years, through gestures, body movements, facial expressions, and those weird little throat noises everyone keeps making when they're excited, scared, or annoyed. But now, those noises have meaning, and meaning has power. Your lips, tongue, and larynx are finally cooperating. You can shape sounds, clicks, hums, huffs, grunts, even that nasal whine your cousin makes when the food's late. These sounds aren't just emotional responses anymore. They're tools. One grunt might mean danger. Another might mean, "Come here." A rising tone might mean, "Where are you going?" or "What did you just say about my spear?" Language doesn't arrive like a lightning strike. It builds, slowly, organically. A sound here, a name there, a phrase that gets repeated enough times it becomes law. Historians still argue whether the roots of complex speech began with tool-making cooperation or even singing. There's a fringe theory that early language developed as rhythmic soundplay, tied to movement and work, think chanting, while dragging a carcass or grinding roots. Either way, it sticks. And once it sticks, everything changes. Because now you don't have to rely on pointing or miming to say, "The lions are by the river again," or "Don't eat that mushroom unless you want to meet the sky spirits." You can tell stories, real stories, like the one you whisper around the fire about the boy who climbed the moon, or the woman who turned into a bear, or that old man who could speak to stones and never got cold. You speak of things that aren't present. You gossip, you warn, you exaggerate, you invent, You describe not just what is, but what was, could be, and should not have happened in the first place, but definitely did. Suddenly, memory isn't private anymore. It's communal. And that means knowledge travels faster, wiser, deeper. Someone invents a new way to carry fire. They tell others. Someone discovers a new edible root. They explain how to dig it. Someone sees a storm pattern no one else understands. They teach. You're no longer limited to what one person can learn. You've created a group mind, and that group mind has layers. Because now it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. You whisper when the spirits are near. You shout when the herd is moving. You laugh when someone tells a story about Uka trying to outrun a rock slide with both hands full of meat. Tone becomes meaning. That grunted phrase with the rising end. That's a question. That flat, low tone, that's a command. That sharp sound you make when someone steps on your foot. Universal. Even your babies are learning differently now. They're babbling, mimicking, picking up sounds like sticky little language sponges. And you encourage them. You repeat names. You point and say things. You laugh when they get it wrong. You cheer when they get it right. This is the beginning of teaching. Not by accident, but on purpose. And because of that, your language evolves faster. Each generation adds complexity, nuance, specificity. That tree over there becomes that bitter root tree by the sharp rocks near the water that dries in summer. You're crafting entire mental maps in shared sound. Even more impressively, you start talking about yourself. Not just I hungry or you slow, but I remember, I want, I dream. You invent pronouns, abstract ideas, emotional words, the kind of linguistic gymnastics that let you say, I don't think she meant to eat all the berries, but she did, and now she's hiding behind the cave. And the moment you can gossip, oh, it's over. Gossip becomes social glue. You know who's generous, who's sneaky, who always takes more than their share. Stories of betrayal or bravery spread like wildfire. You build reputation systems without spreadsheets or scoreboards, just words. And with language comes identity. You name things. You name people. You give those names weight. A name might carry history, a joke, a wound, a promise, a challenge. You speak someone's name and everyone has a reaction, even if that person died seasons ago. You begin to speak of the dead in full sentences. They were brave. She was wise. He never stopped watching the stars. You say these things and others remember. Memory becomes oral legacy. You carry your ancestors not just in bones, but in stories shared, repeated, polished over firelight, until they gleam like truth. And eventually, you speak of things you've never seen. The land beyond the river, the creature with too many legs, the sky where spirits live. You haven't been there, but someone has, or someone said they did, or someone dreamed it. Does it matter? Not really. Because with language, reality becomes collaborative. And the most powerful thing you ever say is this: what if? Two little words, a door cracking open, the start of every idea you haven't had yet, the beginning of every future that doesn't exist. Yet. Your hands hurt. Not from hunting or napping stone or scraping hides, but from something strange pulling weeds, bending, clearing, digging. You're not chasing food anymore. You're coaxing it out of the ground. And honestly, it's kind of ruining everything. Welcome to the slow, itchy, back-breaking dawn of agriculture, where the game changes, the grass stops being wild, and you, dear wanderer, are about to be betrayed by your own brilliance. Let's be clear, it didn't happen all at once. No one woke up and said, "Let's invent farming today." This wasn't a revelation, it was an accident. A long, awkward, glorious accident. One day, someone dropped seeds near a camp. Weeks later, they noticed something familiar growing there. The next season, they dropped more on purpose. It worked. And the consequences were enormous. You went from chasing herds to tending patches, from gathering seeds to planting them, from moving when food ran out to waiting for it to grow. Congratulations, you've invented waiting, which as it turns out is exhausting. Because now instead of following food, you're following a calendar. Rains, sun, seasons, pests. You don't just deal with nature, you try to manage it. And that's where things get complicated. Because while farming means you can settle, build deeper shelters, make bigger fires, even leave behind your old migration routes, it also means your body starts falling apart. Your back aches, your teeth rot thanks carbs, your joints complain from repetitive movement. You're eating more grains, yes, but fewer wild greens, less protein, and you feel it. Historians often call this the Neolithic paradox. Your food supply becomes more stable, but your health declines. You're shorter, weaker, and suddenly prone to all sorts of delightful ailments that come from sleeping beside your own waste. Why? Because farming means density. More people in one place. More trash. More germs. And without antibiotics or plumbing, things get aromatic. You used to walk 10 miles a day. Now you're digging irrigation ditches. You used to eat what the land gave. Now you're fighting weeds, birds, bugs, rot, and your neighbor's goat that keeps eating your barley. But here's the thing, you can't stop. Because farming gives you something dangerous: surplus. Extra grain, extra dried fruit, extra roots you didn't eat today but might need tomorrow. And that surplus changes everything. For the first time, you can store food, and that means you can own food. And if you can own food, you can own land. That's the twist. Your people used to share territory loosely. Sure, some places were yours, but no one really owned the river or the hill or the trail. But now someone says, "These are my crops," and someone else says, "I planted that tree." And suddenly property exists. And with property comes conflict. You build boundaries, stones, fences, angry stares. You argue. You negotiate. Sometimes you throw rocks. Sometimes you throw spears. Sometimes you start laws. Loose ones, sure. Don't steal from the grain pit. Don't trample Ula's beans. If you take from the storehouse, you owe us in meat. You're inventing rules. You also invent roles. Not everyone needs to hunt now. Some stay and weed. Some watch the food. Some fix tools. One person does nothing but sharpen flint all day, and somehow comes the group's first full-time specialist. Division of labor sharpens. You don't all do everything anymore. And that's new. You've always shared tasks, but now you're relying on each other in a deeper, riskier way. You also get possessive. That new pot someone made, that's mine. Those goats you've managed to keep near the hut, also mine. That child with the really loud scream and suspiciously large feet, yeah, definitely mine. You used to survive through mobility. Now you survive through control. But control breeds stress, because now you have something to lose. A bad harvest, devastating. A pest outbreak, catastrophic. A raiding party, unthinkable. So you build walls, ditches, fire breaks. You make plans. You start organizing. We need to plant more of this. You go protect the grain. Someone needs to watch the goats while they poop. There's even evidence of early irrigation systems. Ditches dug, fields flooded. You move water now. You move water. That's wizardry. And with water comes power. Who controls it? Who distributes it? Who decides what gets planted where? Those answers matter now. You start following leaders, not just the loudest person with the sharpest rock, but the one who manages the flow of stuff. Food, water, labor. That's not just survival anymore. That's politics. And through it all, you still remember the old ways. The taste of fresh kill, the freedom of the trail, the nights without walls, the wind in your hair when you were chasing something across the open plain. You remember what it felt like to move. Because now you're rooted. You've traded the wild for the predictable, the chase for the calendar, the hunter's hunger for the farmer's fear of frost. And it works. Your group grows. Your children stay near. Your pots multiply. Your walls rise. But you feel it. A change. You're not just surviving the land anymore. You're shaping it. And in doing so, it begins to shape you back. You're standing in the middle of a marketplace. There's no money, no shouting merchants or coin pouches. But make no mistake, this is a market. A young woman kneels beside a basket of grain. A man squats next to her holding two freshly knapped blades. They grunt, gesture, compare. A piece of dried meat gets added. Someone else slips in with a bone pendant. A trade is made. Hands touch, eyes flick, and everyone walks away with something more useful than what they had before. This is it. Civilization inches in. Not with fanfare, not with kings, but with quiet, practical deals and the human need to make things work. You've come a long way. You're still wearing hides, still cooking over fire, still dodging wild animals. But now you're organizing, exchanging, planning. You're not just reacting to the world, you're designing it. You're planting with intention. Trading not just for survival, but for luxury. That shiny shell bracelet didn't keep you fed, but it did get you 2 cuts ahead in line at the fish pit. Social currency. You build storage structures now, grain pits, clay bins, baskets sealed with pitch and lined with woven grasses. You're managing time itself. Thinking about next season, next year, what might go wrong. And because of that, your mind expands. You're telling bigger stories. Now you don't just say the lion came. You say the lion came because we broke the rule. You tell myths about ancestors who shaped rivers, stars, and people out of clay. You draw those myths on walls, scratch them into stone, paint them on burial tombs. Oh yes, burials have changed too. You no longer leave the dead in simple pits. Now you place them carefully, with tools, with beads, with food. Maybe so they'll have it in the next world. Or maybe just because it feels right. You've started grieving with structure. Not just mourning, but marking. There's a stone at the edge of Camp Flat, smoothed by wind and sun. Someone carved a spiral into it. Another person added a handprint. It's not useful, but everyone respects it. It might be the first monument. And near it, a small group of children sit watching an elder turn a stalk of grain into a long, thin thread. They're learning, not because they're being yelled at, but because they want to understand. You've invented education. No scrolls, no blackboards, just memory story repetition. This is how we grind. This is how we sing. This is how you stay alive. And as your group gets bigger, 50, 60, maybe even 100 people now, you begin to see things shift. Not everyone knows each other. That's new. You need rules, shared rituals, roles that stick. That woman over there, she always leads the harvest. That man, he settles arguments. That other one, everyone says they can speak with the dead, and no one has the guts to disagree. You start forming hierarchies, not tyrannies yet, but systems, structures, habits that become norms, norms that become culture. You even begin to track time. You count moons. You carve lines into bone. You pile stones to mark the solstice, maybe. You know when to plant, when to gather, when the herds will pass. Calendars without numbers, math without digits, wisdom without writing. And somewhere in the middle of all this, you start feeling something strange, something humans have never quite understood how to name. You feel belonging. This group, this place, these rules, these stories, they're yours, and you're theirs. Even when you argue, even when someone steals your best flint scraper, because now you don't just survive by knowing how to hunt or how to sharpen tools. You survive by knowing who you are. That's the final ingredient, the final unlock. Identity. And with it comes dreams of what comes next. You want more than just food and shelter. You want meaning. You want future. You want to be remembered. And so you scratch a symbol onto the fire pit stone thinking, maybe, just maybe, someone will see it one day. Someone will wonder who you were. And in that moment, under a rising sun, surrounded by the noise of people building, arguing, laughing, preparing, you realize you're no longer ancient. You're human, fully, terrifyingly, gloriously human. And your story is just beginning. And now, you can rest. The fire has burned low. The tools are put away. The stars overhead glimmer in familiar shapes, even if the names for them still haven't been invented yet. You lie back against the cool earth, the warmth of the day finally giving way to night. Around you, the past hums softly. You feel the echo of footsteps across dry savannas, of voices murmuring near rivers of laughter, in shelters made from mammoth bone and woven reed. You remember the shimmer of firelight on stone walls, the way a single handprint could say more than 1,000 words. You carry all of that with you, not just stories, but choices, struggles, victories, the slow triumph of thought over chaos, of meaning over instinct. You are the result of 1,000,000 small decisions stacked quietly over time, each one whispering, "Go on, keep going, try again." And now you know where you came from. You know what it cost to walk upright, to speak, to shape tools, to grieve, to imagine, to love, to survive. And all of it is still inside you. So let it settle. Let it stretch out beside you as you drift into dreams that belong to every human who ever sat beneath a sky and wondered who they were. Breathe slow, breathe deep. You're here. You made it. And tomorrow you keep becoming. End of script. Sweet dreams.